What's going on, people? Today we're going to be talking about some rim curb rash repair. Let's get to it. Alright, so today I want to walk you guys through the process of repairing some curb rash. This is inevitable to happen if you have some low profile tires on your car or truck or whatever it may be. No matter how careful you are, it's almost impossible to keep a wheel for an extended period of time without curbing it at some point, which has happened a couple times to me. So for me, 3 of my 4 wheels have been curbed, so I decided to pull them all off. I put my drag pack on it for now. I have the slicks on the truck right now, you know, just driving around like that for the time being until I can get these done. So I want to start off by showing you guys what the steps are, or what the steps I took at least, to fixing this curb rash. So the first thing that I did is I took the wheels, the 3 wheels that had curb rash, and I took my angle grinder with some real fine sandpaper. I took some 800 grit sandpaper, or a sanding disc, on my die grinder, my 90-degree die grinder, and I grind it all down real nice and smooth. So you see I went down to the aluminum in some spots where it was real deep. And so I want to make it all smooth so that you don't see any divots or any valleys or anything like that when you paint it afterwards. So that's the first thing you want to do, is you want to make sure you smooth it out as much as possible before you do any kind of priming or sanding or anything like that. So this is an example of this wheel. This wheel has about 2/3 of the wheel almost has curb rash. So this is part of the worst wheel of all of them, or for sure it is the worst wheel out of all of them at least. So this wheel still needs to be primed and painted. So then after you smooth it out, you know, to where everything's nice and smooth and all the curb rash is gone, then you're gonna put down your primer. So on this wheel, you can see that I've already put down my primer, so all of this has been primed and sanded already. And so in order to prime a wheel, when you go down to the bare metal, you're gonna want to use a self-etching primer. The self-etching primer has an acid in it that will kind of dig into the metal and bond very well. So that's what I use this for. This is the first layer of primer. It's a self-etching primer that you put on the bare metal, and you don't want to paint directly on top of this because the acid that this primer has in it will sometimes cause something to happen with the paint where it may not adhere or dry or cure as well as you'd like. So on top of the self-etching primer, I used a sandable primer, and this sandable primer will adhere better to the paint than the self-etching primer, but acts kind of like a barrier coat between the self-etching primer and the paint. And this is meant to be sanded and smoothed out so that when you paint it, you don't have a rough finish. And so then let me show you what it looks like when I prep the wheel for prime and paint. So right now this wheel has just been primed with the self-etching primer first. I do 2 light coats of self-etching primer, followed by 2 light coats, and then 1 final medium coat of the sandable primer. So as you can see, I taped off the entire wheel so I don't have any overspray. This is one thing that I cannot stress enough. If you're going to be doing this, cover your entire wheel. Don't bother just taping off just a section you need to fix, because if you get overspray on the rest of the wheel, especially if it's a little bit windy out, you're going to be hating your life later on trying to get that all off. So I taped off the entire wheel, and it's just this little section here that I had to fix. So I've already sprayed my primer on there. I'm gonna wait probably 4 or 5 hours before going at it with wet sanding. So after the primer dries, what I use is some 800 grit wet sand. So for wet sanding, you're gonna wanna clean the surface first, get off any grease or oils that may be on the surface from your fingers or from the road or anything like that. So I use Prep-All, which is a surface cleaner, a prepper for paint. And then I spray my primer, and then after a few hours, once all my coats of primer are down, I'll wet sand it with 800 grit sandpaper. And another thing you want to make sure is that your surface is nice and clean. So remember to wash your wheels before you actually sand them, to keep any contaminants or anything like that from getting scratched into the metal as you're sanding it. So remember to wash your wheels always before you do any kind of sanding. And so then now, after I put down both layers of primer on all the wheels, I'm gonna use an airbrush to actually put down the paint. So a lot of people will just put down tape and paint with a spray can on there. But the thing is that when you do that, you're gonna have very sharp edges, and there's only so much that you can sand down the paint and smooth it out if that happens. So instead of doing that, I'm gonna go get the wheels color matched at a local paint shop, and I'm gonna get like a little pint or a few ounces of paint from them and use this airbrush to kind of feather in the paint so you don't have that hard edge. So I'm gonna tape off the inside of the wheel and the tire, but I'm just gonna leave the entire edge exposed so I can feather it in with this airbrush. So I'm gonna do a little bit of paint. I'm gonna put on my base coat, and I'm also gonna feather on some clear coat. And what that allows me to do is wet sand after I put down the clear and buff to smooth everything out. So once I do all that, it should come out nice and smooth, and it should look much more blended, and you shouldn't notice it as much as if I just do it with a rattle can, the paint portion of the repair. Okay, and so now I've taken off all my tape and paper from the wheel, and I wanted to show you guys what the primer looks like before sanding. So up close you can see that it is a black finish, the sandable primer, but it's more of a satin or matte black finish compared to the gloss black the wheels are. So you got to go at this with wet sand and be as careful as possible to not scratch up the surrounding areas. And then afterwards, like I mentioned, it's gonna get painted with gloss black. I'm gonna try to get it matched as well as I can by a shop around here, a paint shop, and I'm gonna spray it in with the airbrush, and hopefully it all smooths out and you'll barely be able to notice it. So of course the best thing you could do for wheels is not curb them, but if it happens, which a lot of times is, you know, just it tends to happen at times, you know, it's just, it is what it is. This is the best way to repair it, I think. You know, like I mentioned, some people will go the route of just plastic dipping an entire wheel, but that plastic dip finish does not last as much as paint will. It will end up peeling up and getting dingy over time. You know, a nice gloss finish or a nice powder coat finish, whatever it may be, matte, satin, whatever it is, it's gonna last a lot longer than any plastic dip or peelable vinyl paint. All right, and so that's pretty much it for this video. I just wanted to, you know, talk you guys through the process that I'm going through to repair these wheels before I put them back in the truck. So I'm gonna make another video to show you guys the final product once I'm able to go get the paint matched and sprayed on the wheels after I do the priming on all of them and sanding and all that. So I will make another update video to show you guys that final product. It should look really good. And I want to show you guys also the way the truck looks like right now on the drag pack. You know, I don't think I've ever had it on the channel with the slicks and the front runners on. All right, and there she is. Gotta say, I'm actually a fan of the drag pack. I think it looks really mean with the 17s on, you know, and the big fat tire in the back. So for the drag pack, what I'm running is just a set of 225 65 17s in the front, and a set of Mickey Thompson 11.5 by 28 inch tires in the back. So these are the ET Street R's. They're the bias ply street radial tires. So they are technically DOT approved, but they're pretty much a slick with a couple of lines on them. You know, since it's a bias ply tire, it's not a radial. So these, I have almost wrecked my truck a couple times in the rain. So I would not recommend driving them in the rain for extended periods of time at least. But you know, right now I'm getting around town with them until I can get my other wheels all finished up. And as you can see, I put them to use a little bit. Whole lot of rubber in here. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. Should I run this look more often instead of the 24s? Let me know what look you guys think looks better. I was even thinking of getting another set of 17s, you know, maybe some Welds or Race Stars or something like that, and running that look more often. I kind of like it, you know, so just let me know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you. Remember to like and subscribe.